Hi, my name's Brigadier General Chris Stockel, retired, and so I have the distinct honor of doing the next panel here and introducing the facilitator, Carolyn. So over to you. We're recording, and it's your next 56 minutes or so. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, Colonel Caroline Pogge, I'm currently the Civil Affairs Planning Team Chief with USAREUR-AF G39 over here in Wiesbaden, Germany. On a mobilization for the past, I guess we're about 7 months in of our 9-month tour. And you know, they said, go to Germany, it'll be great. It'll be a pretty easy tour. And then Allies Refuge happened. So here today with a few folks, we've got quite a few. I'm gonna have them do very quick, brief introductions of who they are, what agency they work with, and how they became involved in Allies Refuge, now Allies Welcome back in the States. And so I'm going to turn it over in order, and we've got some DOD, we've got Department of State, and we also have some of our NGO partners. So Sue Grayler, do you want to start?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Major Susan Grayler. I'm with the Civil Affairs Officer with the 361st Civil Affairs Brigade, which is a reserve civil affairs organization right here in Kaiserslautern, Germany. My civilian job, I work for DLA, Defense Logistics Agency right here. And so I was able to be ready and available as soon as we got word that Operation Allies Refuge needed civil affairs support. Our brigade commander identified early on when this mission was immediately kicking off here at the Ramstein Air Force Base, that we have qualified civil affairs soldiers here in the immediate area, and we were available to begin helping right away. They started with AGR staff, the full-time staff, and they went up for the first, they were responding within 72 hours right on the ground, and then they saw the need and they brought on about 18 of us eventually, but we integrated right away. I started attending meetings with the Department of State every morning, and then just jumping in and working with the Air Force and the Army, but primarily working with the Air Force because they don't have civil affairs assets and they're not aware of the capabilities. So it was really key to identify the leaders and inform them, and then just work all the way down to the ground level on letting them know the capability that civil affairs brings to this type of emergency situation. Department of State and the USAID already knew our capabilities, and they were very welcoming, and I believe that we all worked together and made a great team to make this a successful mission. And pending any questions right now, that's my introduction.
Thanks, Sue. We're going to move over to Dee Swainer from American Red Cross, who is definitely the hero of early activities here in Germany. So Dee.
Thank you, Caroline. So I'm Dee Swainer. I'm the Executive Director for the American Red Cross European Theater. And I received a phone call from, well, first I'm going to start by a quote from Christopher yesterday that said, NCOs are the backbone of civil affairs. And I have to echo that because I received my phone call from Master Sergeant Lloyd that said, hey, Dee, what do you have to bring to the fight? And once I told him that we had equipment and supplies pre-staged down in the Ramstein area, he said, where is it and how can we help? And he got to work and brought our supplies to Ramstein, and we were able to start our mission within 12 hours, and we were on the ground and ready to start our mission. So with that, we were able to set up. I have a station there at Ramstein Air Base, and once our supplies arrived, I think they were picked up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and our team was on the ground at 8 that morning, and we set up our comfort kits, our baby diapers, and we were ready to hit the ground running. And so I must give out kudos to Caroline and to Master Sergeant Lloyd, because civil affairs, I have to say, understood the mission and knew that they needed to call the Red Cross. And from there, we began our work. So that is my introduction, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Thanks, Dee. We're going to switch over to Spirit of America, who I know many of us have worked with across the globe. And so, Colleen, if you could do a quick intro.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Colleen Denny with Spirit of America. For those who don't know, Spirit of America is a 501c3 nonprofit, And we have a worldwide MOU with Department of Defense that was signed in 2018, which gives us the legal mandate to work alongside deployed troops and diplomats to fill gaps and help you all achieve your missions with private money to move at the speed of relevance. So we started receiving needs identified on 25 August by the 21st TSC CMOC. And within a week and a half, we were able to provide support for hygiene kits and blankets for 5,000 individuals. Simultaneously in Kosovo, we were receiving needs identified by the troops at Camp Bondsteel there. And the next month in mid-September, we also provided support covering baby items, shower shoes, formula, breastfeeding pumps, diaper rash cream, all the things that USG funding couldn't purchase or was running into contracting issues or couldn't purchase quickly enough. Simultaneously, we were able to get a charter flight out of Kabul of 121 Afghan partners to Albania, which is where I'm calling in from now. So small organization of 22 people, but we were able to surge. And while I was kind of tied to Albania, we were able to support both Ramstein and Bondsteel remotely. And thank you all for inviting me here today. Over.
Thanks, Colleen. I'm going to switch over to the CA side of it again. And Captain Josh Black, who's one of our forward deployed CA team leaders, ended up in the mix of it in one of our remote sites. So Josh.
Good afternoon or good evening here. My name is Captain Josh Black. I was deployed with 415th Civil Affairs Battalion in support of Operation Atlantic Resolve. I was OPCON on 21st TSC and was 21st TSC's Civil Affairs support to Camp Liya, which is on Camp Bondsteel. It was actually diverted from my original mission, which was covering 21st TSC CAO in the Balkans, and was actually planning 21st TSC's Civil Affairs response to Albanian and Macedonian wildfires. So kind of a little bit flip on the mission there. But yeah, got on ground. There was already some prep work done, and met with Department of State, Gina, who you'll hear from, Billy. Also worked with, was on calls with Colleen. They're even offering to drive across border from Albania to Kosovo overnight to get us stuff. Thankfully, we didn't need to execute that, but we're pretty much constantly calling them and organizing to try and get things that we needed or worried we weren't going to get in a timely manner. This is really my first experience with CA doing this kind of stuff, so it was pretty eye-opening and it was a really great experience. Any questions?
Thanks, Josh. We're going to move over to the Department of State folks. We have both in theater and back in DC. So Tyler, can you launch it for your team?
Sure. Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Tyler Waterhouse, and I am an AGR Civil Affairs Officer, currently on detail to the Department of State, Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration on a one-year fellowship tour. So I've been working this as the single and one military advisor that PRM as a bureau has. We quickly learned that that was not going to be enough military advisors when the evacuation of our Afghani allies kicked off. So fortunately, we've got a lot of other good team members here that you're going to meet that were able to step up and help us fill a lot of the gaps as we work this operation from originally it was going to be just a controlled movement of those that were applying for SIVs, those that worked for us, all the way to a non-combatant evacuation. I'll turn it over to the rest of the team.
Thanks. Josh, can you pick it up from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Joshua Mader. I am the Senior Economic Sanctions Policy Coordinator for the U.S. Department of State in my daytime job, but had the pleasure of working with Tyler and the family over in the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration for a little over a month on this particular operation. I'm a former CA officer myself, and so I think the PRM Bureau recognized they needed some help with translation and to give Tyler some backup. So they asked me to come over there and provide supporting fires for him. So it's great to actually put a face to a lot of the names that I've been working with over the last couple of months, and I'm looking forward to this session.
Thanks, Josh. I was just thinking the same. I don't know what all of you look like till tonight, so this is kind of awesome. Gina, you are in theater, Department of State. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening. I'm Gina Kossum, and yes, wonderful to meet everybody by face. I am currently in Budapest. I am the first person I think who's speaking who has zero military experience, and so it was an amazing experience to get out to Kosovo, and one of the biggest parts of working, the greatest parts of working with CI was helping get introduced to that fantastic experience and have that translation go on live for me in person. I was in a Camp Bondsteel, Camp Liya, as Josh said, from the setup, about 5 days before any Afghans arrived, through the first month of the Afghans arriving and being on the ground. I returned to my day job in Budapest, where I also have nothing to do with this. I'm a regional environment, science, technology, and health officer. And then I didn't last very long, and I went right back to continue supporting Liya during some more transitions, and looking forward to heading back out again. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And last but not least, Master Sergeant Larry Lloyd, who is the 3-9's OPT lead for this, for our part of the adventure in this. So Larry.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So I'll definitely echo what several other folks said. It's great to see so many faces and what really is your brothers and sisters in what was a pretty fierce battle for the first month. So I can't thank enough for all the other folks that are on here. So from my perspective, along with Colonel Pogge, we were part of what is United States Army Europe's new entity, a civil affairs planning team. So we were the first rotation. Heck of a way to kick off your first rotation as a new FTN in theater, I guess. We were sent here actually mainly to work on deterring Russian malign influence and aggression as part of competition. And I actually filled in at the G35 here at USAREUR-AF on the planning side because everyone else was, of course, on leave and the cell. And I said, okay, well, I'll go sit on the Afghan Civ long-term planning development that started in July of this year, actually, well before Kabul fell and the country fell. So we were looking at multiple sites all across Europe, working with, State was leading the charge on talking to other allies and partners who might be some of these long-term sites, having that discussion. We were planning for, I think we were looking at some points up to 18 different sites across the theater, thinking, hey, this is going to be sort of a slow development over time and we'll have a trickle. And then the events of mid-August kicked off, right? And so as the fact that I just happened to be the guy that was already involved in the planning, then had to move from that long-term fuel ops planning to your crisis action planning element, and then being the CA voice as far as USAREUR-AF's overall Army plan development was occurring. So I think the maybe two major points I will move through with this and then kick it over for the greater question and answers is one, you know, the major theme of this symposium for the association is building a network. I think Colonel Pogge and I would easily testify that that network development and connection, the most important place to start that is internal to the Army. There is a lot of people in the Army that says, well, that's a CA thing. I don't really know what that is, but that's something CA does. And I think if they don't have a good understanding, a good voice of what CA can actually bring to the fight, what CA's limitations are, but then also what our abilities are, that's something we have to work through. You also have to work internally across several different G shops to figure out, okay, we're having this issue, who's the entity within the Army that can fix this? And then, so the building the network, important part is internally to the Army itself. Then when you turn around and you go outside, I mean, D is a lifesaver, literally, through this and many entities. The Army itself had some limitations on authorities and permissions of who we can engage with. And some of that building the network is knowing, hey, I don't have the ability to talk to X organization or X person, but does one of my partners have the ability to do that? So D was definitely the point of the spear as being that NGO entity that was here in theater already, had a lot of these connections already built. And she could tell me, hey, we can't source this, but I think I know somebody that does. Can I go ask them and move on from there? So I think with that, I'll end. But yeah, that's the key part of not building network internally to the Army, then knowing the network that you touch, who they end up touching, and can be that force multiplier for you. That's it.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, Tyler, I'm going to kick the first question I see in the chat here, asking about preparations and contingencies for an influx of Afghans that may come in the coming months. And are you able to talk a little bit about how Department of State is planning for what we call the cowboy flights or other folks that are coming through potentially theater or directly CONUS? Over.
Yeah, so that is still one of the big topics of discussion that's going on here in Washington, D.C. with a lot of the senior leadership, particularly like in National Security Council and all the way up to the White House. How are we going to manage that? What is the process going to be? And there are no easy answers, right? If there was an easy answer, we would just, do it. So really having to leverage all the assets that the interagency has from, let's say, DOD being able to use Camp Liya in Qatar or Camp Bondsteel in Kosovo for an extended period of time, all the way to here in the United States, having Afghan people on bases here in the US for an extended period of time, and just looking at how do we balance all of those things in order to best support those allies that stood with us, through the last 20 years. Over.
Thanks. If anybody has any questions, please feel free, if you haven't been in the other ones, to either raise your hand or drop the question in the chat. But I'm going to open with one question while I'm sure someone will pop in for a sec there. But is there anything, if you guys could go back to August, if there's one thing you wish you had done differently, or one thing that you were glad happened the way it happened, could you share what that might be?
Sure, I can kick that off since I think I worked this since well before August even. I will say that initially when this was going to be a controlled effort moving out the SIV applicants, we were able to get everybody in the interagency from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs, all the way down to, the Army elements that were going to be boots on the ground in Qatar. We were able to get everybody on the same call and start communicating as flat as possible to be able to share information. And that included bringing in our UN partners with IOM, right away. Initially we're the military, everybody likes to do everything on the high side. And, we were able to say, hey, we got to bring this down to the low side because we need to really coordinate and level the bubbles with everybody that is, contributing to this effort. So for us, with CENTCOM, we were able to do that because we had a little bit of lead up time. Unfortunately, with UCOM, they just kind of got thrown in the mix when it turned into the non-combatant evacuation. So we didn't really have that lead time to build up and, get those relationships, even if they are just, email and phone call relationships. We didn't have a lot of time to build those up. So I wish we would have had more time for the Europe team to be able to build those relationships prior to the incident kicking off. Over.
Awesome, Josh. Go ahead, Josh.
Tyler, I just have one comment, and just to introduce myself. My name is Col Allen McKeen. I'm the Civil Affairs Division Chief at Central Command. And, we had started back in June tabletop exercises on how this deliberate SIV movement would go. And as we all know, it kind of went south pretty fast. Speaking with that forum, and just to kind of echo what Tyler was saying, we had started both OCONUS calls and CONUS calls on how the refugee flow was going to be going into NORTHCOM. So NORTHCOM and CENTCOM participated in calls. We struggled at the front end at CENTCOM on the classification, and a lot of that had to do with the NEO. And finally, we brought that to General McKenzie, the commander, and he said, let's go all unclass. And then we were able to tie in everyone from the Joint Staff, OSD, Department of State, DSCA, all the relevant parties, including lawyers, to be able to talk through this absolutely complex operation. And again, seeing someone like Captain Black on here talking about the tactical aspects of this is really enlightening, because at the stratosphere, we were trying to figure out how to get $150 million or $500 million through Congress on ODACA doing policy letters and how do we get that to be used for this incident, and can we even use it on US soil? All those things were done through numerous meetings and calls on Unclass with 152 participants on these calls that we were doing nightly. And that included calls with DepSecDef, the chairman, and all the way through this to try to nail down these policies. And there were some things that we did right, and there were some things that we did after these after action reviews, especially with money in ODACA, that we did absolutely wrong, versus sending money to the combatant command versus sending it directly to the services. And so things like that you just don't see on the ground. And the reason why we needed Red Cross, and we needed IOM, and we needed Spirit of America, and all these people to come in there on the front end is because of how a lot of these conflicts that we had at the joint staff or at OSD between the different departments that we struggled with on the front end. But if you really think about it, to be able to make a lot of this happen in such a short amount of time, and then to hear about some of the successes on the ground is really, truly remarkable. So I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Alan.
I'll take oh, sorry.
Nope, who's gonna go?
So Josh, go ahead, and then Sue, if you can go after him.
Okay, yeah, I kind of got a two-part. One of them is going to be on the same theme. The first is I really wish I had a better understanding coming into this about how Army logistics works. A lot of the issues we had were because essentially on Camp Bondsteel, we had to recreate pretty much from scratch all these processes that are required to get things onto Camp Bondsteel. Because we could order them the way they're ordered now, we had to create a new separate parallel system. Everything from medicine that's not typically offered to field hospitals, to getting food, all that kind of stuff had to be started from scratch. And I just had no concept going in what any of that meant, how to do any of that. And pretty much it was just Gina and I painfully pulling threads and where they led to get the right answers. The second kind of goes into the coordination piece. I had no idea. I think I signed into APE once and had forgotten it. And I had no idea how to share anything with interagency partners because I couldn't get anything from Teams. We couldn't do Teams invites. We couldn't move documents that had any kind of information on them. So I had to kind of figure out the help from USAREUR-AF, even that APAN was for this kind of thing. And by the time I actually got access to APAN again, unlocked my account, the need was gone. So that kind of me flat-footed on the ground.
Thanks, Josh. Sue, you had something to add?
Yes, I just wanted to go along that theme of the funding and the issues with funding. We understand here on the ground, just to get the support and get approval for reservists was extremely difficult. There's active duty civil affairs elements in Europe. And if planning was for me to learn, and I knew there was planning going on ahead of time, but perhaps in the future, if some type of another emergent crisis occurs, the idea to start to plan in civil affairs assets at the tactical level on the ground where these types of people needing crisis care are going to land, and planning that in advance would probably be beneficial. I know there's a flash to bang, but the reserve orders process is very cumbersome. There was a limited number of civil affairs assets at the 21st Theater Sustainment Command G9. They were smart enough to alert the reserve assets here. We only had a few, like I said, active Guard Reserve full-time staff that were pulled away to do this. And then some of us started, but it took almost, in reality, 12 to 14 days to actually get the reservist on the right type of orders. If we could have crossed colors of money and allowed us to use annual training dollars to start the mission, but I understand that color of money really played a hindrance in getting the reservist in the fight right away. And in the beginning, it is the critical time to have those on the ground because military personnel that are not attuned to dealing with displaced persons or refugee, I know they were evacuees, but all those skill sets that the civil affairs personnel were trained on, it was huge. It was a huge gap here at Ramstein. The Air Force personnel and the Department of State are worrying about the ceiling, the sky, all those big ticket items, and the airmen and the officers, the Air Force officers on the ground that are used to dealing with just cargo in, cargo out. And they really needed the benefit of us on the ground to help them make it. These are people and they're human and they're not prisoners and there's nothing wrong with them. They're in a crisis. And so once we were able to really get on the ground and bring that, the reality to the lowest level, we were able to start just doing those basic civil affairs tasks, and it made a huge difference. Additionally, I just wanted to say that I forgot my thought process there, but the key is that you got to start planning ahead on any of those crisis situations at the tactical level to some degree, because it was just overwhelming for the people here that had no training. Over.
Thanks, Sue. Josh Mader, and then saw Larry, Amelia, and Gina. I got y'all. The teacher in me is watching the hand raises there.
Yeah, thanks very much. I know there are two Joshes, so it gets complicated. First, I would really like to just footstop something that Colonel McEwen said, in that I think it's easy to kind of pick apart the things that didn't go well, but we can't forget to recognize just the, incredible effort and success that went into this mission. And really, there are no elements or no other country in the world that could pull off something like this. And so to not recognize the effort that was put in by our DoD counterparts and State Department and other interagency counterparts on this operation writ large, I think would be a real disservice. And so, I do want to recognize that. I think additionally, I'd like to, just kind of echo some of the comments that were made on the authorities piece and the funding piece. One, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have CA representation and the CA voice in organizations like the State Department. For, as much as it was a challenge to ensure that translation between Joint Staff and the Pentagon, OSD, that filtered down appropriately and accurately through the COCOMs, TSC, down to, Josh Black and his team on the ground, right, in Bonsteel as an example. It's equally important to ensure that the interagency colleagues are speaking the same lingo. And so the role that Tyler and his colleagues play in communicating with, the assistant secretaries and the deputy assistant secretaries within PRM and the European Bureau and others is just vitally important, and really being able to translate that. And, Josh Black raised a good point about just the Army logistics piece, and having come from, the Army Sustainment Command world in a former life, I can tell you that nobody in the State Department, or very few, understand what that process is. And so again, having somebody with the ability to translate, what that practically means on the ground, what the decisions that are being talked about here in DC will actually mean for the folks on the ground is just critically important. And then I think within the DoD framework itself, being able to accurately and timely translate decisions, whether it's on authorities, whether it's on funding, whether it's on contracting, down from the COCOM or higher, through those middle layers to the tactical level folks that are actually on the ground doing the work, is critically important. And I know it's easier said than done, and there's always room for improvement. But I think, figuring out how to get the operational folks and the lawyers speaking the same language at all levels is something that we can certainly learn from this exercise and in previous exercises and continue to refine.
Thanks, Josh. Larry, you put your hand down, so I'm going to assume I'm going to skip you. So I'm going to go to Amelia.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. Emilia Merenmies from Geneva. And first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who's doing and who's working on this incredible operation. I mean, it's a massive undertaking. I've been on the other side, been in Kabul and worked on this situation in 2015. So thank you very much for everyone for their service and for their sacrifice and then for their time. What Major Grayler was speaking about kind of touched me but most recently was what Joshua mentioned, and what I was actually basing my question about is about the sort of communication between operations to strategic level. How do you get that message from what's happening on the ground? You know, how do you get it up? Is that communication open? And that what are the sort of avenues for that kind of feedback to the strategic level, so that you get the funding and so that you get the actual, well, the capabilities on the ground, trained staff, etc. And I just wanted to say that, yeah, I wondered if this was an observation that the people who were earlier on the call from USAID are not on this call. And I was wondering if that somehow reflects about how the operations and the strategic actually talk to each other, that when we have a symposium, a platform like this, not everybody is able to attend.
Does anyone on the panel want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I'll kick off real quick, ma'am, just to say, I mean, you certainly know this as well as I do. I think what USAREUR-AF, United States Army Europe's leadership would tell you is the best reporting they've gotten day in, day out, most informative reporting has been from CA. And that's a credit to the folks on the ground, because it's, you know, whether it's Major Grayler or Captain Black's, you know, their tactical level reporting was making it all the way to the G3 and the operational side and raising questions U.S. Army wide, right? So I think there's a lot of, I think CA has that inherent need and desire to want to communicate and know to want to over communicate on the same token. So I think, again, they may not have always gotten back to get into Captain Black or Major Grayler that the reports were making it there, where they were getting read at very high levels and then being disseminated from that. I would also say, I think just because of the nature of us as reservists also understand how some of these other organizations work, right? Like Colonel Pogge, I know has worked for the Department of State. I worked for the American Red Cross for 3 years. So some of us just had that inherent knowledge of, oh, this is what the American Red Cross does, right? So I already know how to talk some of this language and cross communicate with it. So that's certainly not only the CA benefit, but also the CA reservist benefit of that skill set that we bring to Army operations.
Thanks, Larry. Gina, I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to start by saying, you know, in all of the wins that we had, it was having such an amazing team. I mean, everybody who was there, everybody working, no matter where they were in Germany or in Washington or out in the lily pad sites, you know, came with such passion. And it was that passion. We wanted to do it. We wanted to do it right. And the crazier it got, the more dedicated I think we all became. And that just, it made a world of difference, right? And we all sat together. The problems just kept coming at us. You just couldn't stop making up what was happening. But we would sit down and say, is this, like, what is the problem? And is it the right problem? You know, and looking at, you're all talking about the authorities and, you know, the color of money and trying to figure that out. And then when we got to the question of what the actual right problem is that we needed to tackle, is everyone in the room who needs to tackle that problem, and oftentimes it wasn't. And so then, you know, getting all the stakeholders together. And at the top, Tyler, you talked about the calls that you had with CENTCOM and CONUS back in the summer. And by the time it made it to EUCOM, and we were able to really get all the players on the call, it made such a world of difference. And we started to see that also in Kosovo, where we were. The more people we brought in, the more people at the table, the quicker we could get things resolved. The communication piece was just incredible. Even when we're sitting next to each other, I was laughing when Josh, Captain Black, was talking about how we couldn't get our Teams channels to work. We tried every which way to be able to share information. We're sitting next to each other, and we were just constantly reinventing the wheel, which was just something we logistically shouldn't have to work on when we're together, but something that we did to the point of his sit reps, which were phenomenal. And everybody in the operation was doing sit reps. We're all trying to feed up information. We're all trying to get to the right policymakers, to get the right policy decisions to help us operationalize on the ground. And so we worked really closely in sharing our sit reps, not just when they came out, but also as we were developing them. Like, hey, we're gonna focus on this piece. Is this the right way that we need to focus on? Is this how you saw what happened today? Is this the mood that you're capturing? You know, or is there a different thing we should be capturing as well? And that was really helpful going up, because we were really able to amplify the message going up and out from the ground.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. I do think I can delete like half of my WhatsApp conversations because they seem to all be related to this effort. So thankfully it's starting to slow down. Alan, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just want to speak to two items. One from earlier comments from Sue, as well as Josh. And this is from a CENTCOM lens from planning, a planning piece of this. And I know you guys are at the bottom of the tornado when these kind of operations comes through. I just want to kind of walk you through just a little bit about some of the things that we did and how it kind of ties to this whole conference of these 2 days. First of all, there's always a push to get the right assets at the right place. What I found at CENTCOM was there were two things that were going on simultaneously. One, there was the NEO that we were worried about possibly happening, and the other was the deliberate movement of SIVs. Those two became conflicted. So at the same time, we're working with the 18th Airborne Corps to do an airfield seizure, Bagram. At the same time, we're working, we're making this assumption Department of State is going to be continued. They're going to have their embassy open. They're going to continue to push people through for deliberate withdrawal. And then at some point, it's, okay, now we have to worry about security issues. So we have a crisis response standing task force ready to go within the theater. What they don't have is organic civil affairs. They loan a little bit from NAVCENT that may advise them, but they don't have that. So on the orders process, whether it was the NEO or the SIV movement, we have within there, we have the immediate response force, the IRF, that we have a civil affairs company active duty ready to go anywhere for 72 hours. The decision to use them versus in Haiti was one of these kind of things that we juggle. So that all that planning kind of goes into effect. With that, then we had follow-on forces with Compo 3 ready to go on the reserve component side. And we had planned, I think, for 90 days for them to backfill and then stay on for 6 months. We all know that didn't come to fruition. But what's most important about this whole process, much like what you did at UCOM, we did at CENTCOM. So within my team, I have 25 in my team. 11 of those are Army reservists that come in on a year rotation, and we had one up in DC. We deployed one to the Department of State ACTF immediately. And that was a transfer over from USAID, our LNO there, who just, oh, by the way, happened to do for the full-time job was a state PRM employee, government service employee. So that was pretty nice to have Chris Upchurch there because he was an ace in the hole, who then ended up going over to Qatar and acting as that voice with IOM to start getting those approval processes through for DACA spending. The second thing is we backfilled him with another reservist up in ICTF or ACTF. We had 3 deployers that went to Bahrain as part of that crisis response. And then we had one that went to HKIA. So in a matter of a few weeks, we had Army reservists that were at CENTCOM deployed all over the globe. And that talks about the partnership between active component and at the whole time waiting for SOCCENT or for SOCOM to deploy forces to support and looking at other lily pads. So I just tell you that those are in the plans, but that timeline sometimes gets shorted, at least from the CENTCOM lens. We ended up sending SOCOM over to LUD, but I think it was a day late and a dollar short. And then just talking real quickly to Josh, some of the comments you made about the planning between the interagency. I think there's some good dialogue that went in between DOD, Maine, and HST with Maine State. I think that there were a bit of food fights between USAID and BHA trying to figure out how they're supposed to be the experts at this. PRM deferred this to IOM to kind of be their lead. And I can see friction between our BHA and USAID reps, along with how that delineation was going with state PRM. And then I'll just add this is that I think that having poll ads here at CENTCOM was critical to tying in those relationships. And much like we have Tyler doing a mill ad type job, but having those poll ads here at CENTCOM to bring us the right connections, not as staff action officers, that's not their job, but to connect that and be able to relay that information was extremely helpful. I would submit though, that we didn't have HST, DOD on those TTXs that we had in June, the right people participating, because you have an under-resourced bureau like PRM that was struggling for manpower. It doesn't have the deployability to get out to all these different lily pads immediately to start those processes. And that's a challenge. And it's something that we have to take into account moving forward. And I'll leave it there for comment.
Yeah, no, Alan, I think that's an interesting point. And it's interesting as you try and see how even here where Master Sergeant Lloyd was our OPT lead and trying to make sure that the equities for CA were brought into the planning process. I think actually, it's funny you mentioned Chris Upchurch. Somehow I got news that he existed and I picked up the phone and we connected early on. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing down there? So we can figure out what we're supposed to be doing up here. Because you guys were ahead of us in many ways, a few weeks ahead of some of the timelines. And so having that understanding of where the RAF can get put into play, the rotational forces, and I think it's a key point that you bring up of everybody's got to figure out what those timelines are. And to Chris Stockel's question over should Compo 3 have a quicker deployment, for those of you that didn't see his comment, the question is there's a thought that the 83rd is going to be cut. We actually just had some ability to comment on that. The 83rd CA forces that are the conventional support in the active duty force. And I, for one, this is my personal opinion, I think it's a really bad idea. The 83rd has an ability to be able to come to the fight much faster than Compo 3 can. And so we used RAF forces, it sounds like, in most of the theaters. So CENTCOM and UCOM both used people we had in theater that happened to be. In our case, we've got some 83rd folks and we have some folks from 353 CA Command that were here and able to get into play. And as Major Grayler described, getting orders for her ADOS team from the 361, and these are CA soldiers who live and work here in theater, still took us 2 weeks. And so I'm not sure we could go any faster than that, getting folks on the appropriate set of orders. So I think that's one of those things that as a proponent, we really need to tell the powers that be, is getting rid of the 83rd really worth the value that they think they're gaining from that? Because I think overall it may be a detriment to our overall capabilities. So that's just my opinion on that one. But yeah, interesting questions as it goes. Amelia, you had, oh, go ahead, Josh, Matter.
I'm sorry, Amelia, I didn't mean to jump in front of you. I just wanted to comment on something that Alan had said about the poll ads. You know, there's no poll ad is alike, and I think that there isn't uniformity in terms of you know, the roles that the poll ad plays across the UCOMs. And so I think having the relationships established, especially in some of the more functional spaces between state, DoD, and some of the other interagency players, is going to be critical, you know, moving forward as these exercises you know, continue. I think certainly CENTCOM is the gold standard in terms of the, generally anyway, in terms of the poll ads functions and kind of coordinating that role. I'm not sure though, and you're just airing our dirty laundry, I'm not sure that we have the same level of support at the UCOM space from the poll ad early on in the process. So just a lesson learned there.
No, great point. Amelia, you had a follow-up comment?
Yes, thank you. And if I may just take a bit time of a very specific questions, that's to Swainer related to the Red Cross work here. I'm another thing, also a Red Cross actor myself, and I'm wondering why is American Red Cross specifically working in this space, considering that there is German Red Cross, and I don't know who it is, if it's international ICRC in Kosovo who is acting. Why is specifically American Red Cross acting in this German space? And I'm just wondering if that would be somehow could be perceived as a little bit more of this unilateral approach and maybe insular, having and sort of you have also the German Red Cross presumably working with Afghan refugees that German government lifted from Kabul. How do you reconcile that kind of overlap in an organization that's based on independence and unity and so forth?
So the American Red Cross is congressionally mandated to be on military installations overseas. And so we're already here. And so we partnered with the German Red Cross in this mission. And so the German Red Cross did assist us during this mission with the Afghans.
Yeah, and I think it's also key to highlight, Dee is very much underselling how much she did those first few weeks. We obviously didn't have as DOD some of the authorities to speak with some of the interagencies. I know Master Sergeant Lloyd talked about earlier. And so there were many times that we would send folks to Dee and say, hey, if you want to help, we'd love participation. We can't do it, but hey, here's this wonderful woman over in the Red Cross. And so Dee was literally the point person, gosh, it seemed like for a couple of weeks there, probably felt like years to you, with all the different actors from around the world that were trying to help in this conversation. So I don't know, Dee, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, or how that piece came to play, because I know you were swamped.
Right, actually, so we did work with Church of Latter-day Saints, who actually partnered with us, as well as the Kaiserslautern military community actually helped us with tons of donations for this mission. And so we also partnered with Department of State, IOM, we worked with them as well. We had 566 volunteers that actually donated 12,000 hours. I had 12 paid staff for this mission, for this huge mission. And so anyone because people can't donate directly to the military, and so they donated directly to us to assist with this mission. And that's how we were able to sustain from the day of the mission until we actually ended the mission on the 25th.
Yeah, and that was, like I said, that was a lifesaver, because there are many things, especially as you try and look at the logistics Captain Black spoke about, trying to get things for pediatric and geriatric populations, not usually a group of people we work with. And so having folks like Spirit of America, Colleen's group being able to fast track some purchases, and Dee and all of her team being able to funneling in some of those agencies and aid opportunities was definitely a lifesaver, that we would not have unraveled the red tape, bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it, to get those things to the people that needed them in a quick manner.
And you have to understand, like, in this process with the lily pads, we weren't even getting approvals from countries to even land there, like, days before we had flights showing up, or had negotiated what happens if somebody on the airfield needs to go to a local national hospital, things like that. I mean, the work that our diplomats did to nail down all these countries, to pull whatever strings they had to do to allow us to get these people out, was remarkable. But you have to understand, it's this, it would be wonderful to have a plan and a playbook on this, but when you have the Secretary of State flying out all over to try to do something, the Department of Defense, everybody trying to just get us the access to do that, or lay in contracts and things like that. I mean, it was really remarkable that this came together. I mean, I don't want to say as smoothly as it did, but as smoothly as it did, when you look at like where we were a week before the country fell.
Yeah, can I just say, absolutely, I don't want to be critical in any, and I'm not. I think that what you've achieved in terms of where the refugees, evacuees have landed is remarkable. And I absolutely salute you for all that work. I look forward to the other conversation we'll be having in the next session, though.
Thanks, Amelia. Colleen, and then Stanislava.
Sure, thank you. I think a major lesson learned, I'm a veteran, so I served for 8.5 years before I joined Spirit of America. And a major lesson is that no money moves faster than private sector money. It can be wired or Western Union in minutes. And so, that's why organizations outside the military exist to support your efforts, like American Red Cross with the amazing work they did, or like Spirit of America. And that happens during rapid response activities like this was, and on the day-to-day missions that you all are carrying out, both in state and DOD. And back to Larry's point, having that network, both internal and external, is something you never want to be trying to make a new friend during a crisis. You always want to have that friend beforehand. So debriefs like this afterwards, and maintaining those relationships in the network while we're in steady state. We all know this, but important to reinforce while we're hot washing activities like this.
No, it's a great point, Colleen. We're definitely dusting off some phone books, I think, across the group as we tried to figure out who we needed to call and how to get a hold of them. Stanislava, I think you are going to get our last question of the night, and then Tyler, I know you've got a wrap-up comment too.
Thanks very much to all of you for all of your great work and all this good news. I just have a quick question on the extent to which you considered or perhaps sort of rolled out any consultation with other militaries that are dealing with this sort of effort. I know that there was a lot of discussion around burden sharing, if you will, after the evacuation as to which NATO allies were going to, take however many people and so forth. But in addition to sort of the overall strategic guidance on how civil military coordination is dealt with in a crisis response between allies, did you potentially have even short consultations with here's how, considering where you all are, here's how the Germans are doing this on their end, they're absorbing some of these people in, more as a lessons learned as we go exercise ally to ally?
Sure, no, that's a great question. I'm going to tackle this one quickly just because we're going to get running short on time. But I also want to say, as we mentioned earlier, we have civil affairs teams throughout Europe right now operating, and many of the teams had these conversations with some of our NATO partners and allies, those that either were participating in various ways or those that were considering participation. And I know a few of the teams said, hey, we're trying to figure out if they go to location X to support either the NATO operation or some other operation, how that was going to happen, and what our teams had learned, because they would talk to their buddies and say, hey, I know Josh Black is working this issue. What did you do or what did you learn? Because I think I may have a team going down to support something similar to it. And so that conversation has happened, and we've encouraged them to continue that, especially now as we get the ability to look back a little bit. And also times like this where we're able to come together and just have a short hour, which would definitely flew by, of just talking about what we've done and how we've learned from this and what we would do different or make sure we bring with us the next go round. So that's an excellent question, and hopefully everyone continues to have those conversations with our partners and allies, as well as internal to our American communities, whether it's internal to DoD or as suggested across our agencies. And Tyler, I think you are going to have the last comment.
All right, well, thank you. Well, I just wanted to, kind of looking at this from just my little foxhole here, one thing going forward, what can we as civil affairs, professionals do in future, conflicts or emergencies as stuff like this, could arise. One thing we've noticed is the use of different funding streams, particularly with ODACA, and being that it is for the humanitarian efforts. As soon as you hear anybody says the word humanitarian in DoD land, they kind of look to the CA guys for, input. So we as civil affairs professionals, we really need to understand some of these lines of funding and how they are used, and what are some of the big, red lines, like you cannot use funding for this, or it should be used funding for this. And I get it, we're not attorneys and we're not commanders, so we don't make those ultimate decisions, but being able to provide some immediate information to a commander or to a staff, I think will be additional value added that we can provide the commands at critical times. Over.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. And with that, I know we've just got a few more minutes. So before General Stockel pulls me with the hook, I'm just going to say thank you to the panel for joining me tonight. And obviously, thank you also for your efforts the last 3 months and in many cases beyond. And also, Alan, thank you for bringing the CENTCOM perspective in. That was really great to hear. Some of our partners were doing it down the way there. So thanks everybody for joining tonight. I also want to do a shout out to our sponsors, both to the symposiums, the Third Order Effects and Valcomere, for helping sponsor the symposium and bringing everybody together and allowing us this free forum to be able to have these conversations. that I think are so integral in creating these networks across our different agencies and amongst our different partners that we're going to end up seeing wherever we land with our operations, as we've found very keenly this summer. I thought I was just going to Europe for a fairly simple deployment, and that was far from what I've discovered this year. So I thank everybody, and if you will hold out here, those that are dropping off, this is going to be a transition now into the next session, which is, let me grab my notes here, the lessons, the Allied and Multinational Approaches to Building Civil Military Networks, which is going to start up on the hour. So I encourage you to stick around. For those of you here in Europe, stick around a little bit later. You can sleep in hopefully on Saturday, or at least on Thursday when you have your day off. And then everybody in the States, do a quick refresh of your coffee and join us back here in a few minutes. So thank you, everybody. And I had a great discussion and great finally putting faces with the names and voices.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.